Meg, thanks so much for joining today. And I'm excited to hear about what you're doing in your class. But to start off, can you just tell me a little bit about yourself, your current position, where you're teaching, that kind of thing?
Yes, so I teach in biological sciences. I'm an advanced instructor and I teach at Virginia Tech.
hmm And can you tell me a little bit about Virginia Tech? What kind of a school is that?
Sure, it's a large land grant university. And so we have students from all over Virginia, international, around the US as well. We have students that are first generation, students that are just getting involved in science. We have a lot of pre-health students that are interested in going on to things like medical school or graduate school. And we also have students that are starting to get involved in undergraduate research. So we have students from a little bit of everything.
Okay, great. And can you tell me a little bit about this particular class? We're going to talk about one of the classes that you teach. If you can just tell me a little bit about that particular class. What is the subject? Yeah.
Yeah. So I teach cell function and differentiation. It is a sort of your traditional cell and molecular biology course, and it is at the 2000 level. This means students have had the fast-paced intro courses. It's
hmm
one of the last major requirements before they head on to upper level courses, and it's really trying to give them a sense of how does the cell work and how to apply some of the materials that go along with understanding cell biology.
Okay. So most of the students, or maybe all of the students in this class would be biology majors.
So biology majors are required to take this course,
Uh-huh.
but we often have students that might be in agriculture or life sciences, HNFE, that's the health professions side of things, neuroscience, biochem. There's a lot of people that will come to this class, but I know that all the majors have to take this course.
Okay. Okay, great. And in terms of the size of the class that you're
Mhm.
teaching and the kind of support that you have.
Mhm. This runs about 120 students every
hmm
semester, and it is supported by, I have four undergraduate TAs. They are a really useful team. They specifically help with grading and
hmm
also with the active portion of class, where I have days where we're just working through material and having students practice. And
hmm
I can't go and help 120 students all on my own, so this really
Sure.
gives me the ability to do that active portion.
Okay, great. So tell me about what you did and where the inspiration came from. And yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things I think is so important is to think of this class as a foundational course and sort of the bridge between the intro courses, where we're really just starting to give students facts, and the upper level courses where students are really going to focus on using primary literature and really getting deep into the material. And so scientific literacy is one of the most important things we can teach an undergraduate STEM major.
Mhm,
While we use those skills like how to find journal articles and how to read journal articles and how to interpret figures at the 4000 level courses, it's not often something we teach intentionally at the foundational level.
mhm,
So I wanted to make sure that these skill sets could be woven into my curriculum,
mhm.
and be something that I could sort of give as learning objectives more holistically beyond just the we're going to learn about mitochondria and chloroplasts and the
Okay.
traditional material.
Okay. So tell me how you did that. What did you get the students to do? What did that look like?
Yeah. So I gave two very quick surveys, one at the very beginning of the semester, one at the end of the semester, just asking students how confident did they feel in these three skill sets, the
hmm
finding, reading, and interpreting.
hmm
And that was just to see what did they come in with and
hmm
what did they leave with. I
hmm
also asked the question, were you participating in undergraduate research or have you participated in undergraduate research? Because I thought that could be a big confounding factor. If you're already in the research world, this is probably a much
Sure.
more familiar landscape to you. Then throughout the semester, I built in small scaffolded assignments. So they had every unit, there's 5 units, they had a chance to go find a journal article on something that we covered during that unit. That was graded on how did you go through the process of searching, much
Okay.
more than, I'm grading the paper that you actually found. And it
Right.
was just a chance for them to go and see that they can look this stuff up for themselves and go deeper if they would like to.
hmm
And then I also built about every other day, we have an active class day. So we would cover protein transport, and then bring in a primary journal article on a protein transport story and really unpack it and use the vocab that we'd used in the class and the topics and the techniques and really put those together in a real world example for those students to practice. This all accumulated with a final exam that is based on a journal article. So they had to read it, take notes on it, bring it in, and then answer questions about it. So I was able to gather data not only on their confidence, but also on do you have like what are your skill sets like as well.
Sure. So it sounds like there were two things there. One was actually just the ability to go and find a
Mhm.
relevant research article.
Yeah.
And the second one was then drawing on a particular research article, which I presume you had chosen. Did you
Yes.
choose it from that? This is just a
Mhm.
minutia question. Did you choose it from the articles that the class brought to you, or had you pre-chosen those articles?
That's a great question. So I have pre-chosen the articles to specifically align with the class material and be as not too complicated,
Right.
not pulling in and the stuff we need. That being said, I looked at all the journal articles the students brought in this
Hmm.
year, and there are a lot that are going to come in class next year because there were some really amazing ones. But
Okay.
their assignment is due at the end of the unit, and these papers are
Okay.
through
Right.
so that yeah, it's a timing issue as well.
Okay. So let's just drill into that because let's drill into the first bit, the finding of articles bit first.
Mhm.
Um, how did you help them get there, right? Because if you say to an average student, like, go find an article, it can be pretty
Yes.
hit and miss. Did you scaffold that in some way?
So we did. So on the first day of class, we did a little bit of syllabus, and then we brought in the College of Science librarian. And they were able to help us by giving a presentation showing what databases you can use, how to use them, how filters can help, how things like the pluses and the parentheses can help you say, I want this, but not anything to do with this,
Okay.
and really guiding them through the steps of that process. So before they even had to have an assignment, they had a sense of what that looks like to walk through and tools to can help them. You didn't have to use all the super fancy tools, but a
Sure.
lot of the students got really into because one of the questions we ask is, what were you searching for? Because there's an
Mm.
art to the key terms and what
Hmm.
is it called medically versus what is it called, every day. Um,
Mm.
and so some students really, really got into the sort of the mechanics and almost the computational science of that search
Right.
process.
Okay. Interesting. And I mean, I guess it could be interesting at some point to look at how different students are even choosing to search, right? I
Yes.
mean, there's a whole sort of interesting aspect just to that part of it.
Mhm.
Um, but the more interesting thing then is how you helped them in terms of the understanding, and what were those sort of activities and exercises? Let's just walk through one of those examples that you
So I'll
did.
take one at the beginning and one at the end
Hmm.
because I kind of envision this like teaching swimming where you start in the shallow end and then
Yeah,
by the end you're swimming laps on your own.
yeah.
So one of our first activities is just pictures. So we start out with microscopy. You can't really study a cell unless you know how to look at a cell, and that
Mm,
is a lot of microscopy techniques. So we go over scanning electron microscopy, and we go over more the light microscopy ways, the genetically engineering to make things glow. And so we have a whole list of things that could get overwhelming. And then for our first day, rather than unpacking an entire journal article, we've cherry picked figures from about a dozen papers.
mhm,
And we're just going to talk about, oh, this is looking at the Zika virus. So what kind of image do we have to use? Well, it's a virus, so we have to go down to the electron microscopy. And then how did we prepare this? Is this cell still alive? Is it dead? We do a breast cancer diagnosis using the
mm,
histology and the IHC pictures. We look at let's see the Iceman and looking at the pollen in his stomach to figure out when he died because the pollen will
okay,
only last for a few weeks, so he
yeah,
died within this month. So we just tiny little snippets and just showing you why these pictures matter to a story. Um,
okay.
so that's sort of the beginning. And
Mhm,
then by the end of the semester, we will take an entire journal article. I will give them a worksheet that sort of has, usually there's a few vocab words because every paper you have to just learn the new wording. Even if you're in that field, the wording
mm,
is always a little different. So we'll have usually vocab sort of search and find. So set you up with, these are the words you kind of need to know to get started.
Right.
Okay, I'll ask questions about things. And then they will just let them loose and they'll look through the paper, talk to their peers, work in small groups, ask questions if they have any. And then we recap at the end with clicker questions. And that
Okay.
is very strategic on my part. That allows them to sort of check their answers and make sure they got the point when we discuss it at the end. But
Hmm.
also it means I don't have to grade worksheets from 120 students every other day.
Right.
So it's a way to make sure that they get credit for their work and
Mm.
that I also don't have to have a burden of grading as well.
Right. It also gives them instant feedback, right? Which is the beauty of that sort of clicker type question, is that at the moment that the student has just been grappling with the question, they get to
Yeah.
see how they responded to that. Okay, so what was the final outcome? I mean, in terms of how the students did, their level of confidence, what
Yeah.
I presume you're going to do this again. What has really worked in terms of this intervention?
Absolutely. So student confidence rose, well, you can see it in graphs. It's statistically significant across both finding papers, reading journal articles, interpreting figures. We shifted the bell curve very considerably,
Hmm.
which was wonderful news. I think what was equally supportive is that looking at the actual, exam data, not
Hmm.
just their confidence levels, we also see that reflected in their ability to do these things on the final
Hmm.
exam. So they're confident, they seem to having do it well. In terms of the literature search, I asked the students, would you recommend this? And the results were overwhelmingly yes, do it again. And I gave an option that was just don't put the points back on the test, but I don't really care. As long as the points still go on the test, I'm ambivalent. And even with an answer like that, they said, no, no, put this back in.
Okay.
So I think they really enjoy that. We also looked at that compared to test scores, and
Hmm.
students across all levels of test scores wanted these assignments. So I think that shows that we're reaching a lot of students, which was
Right.
important to me. Um,
Right.
I think
Right. So there's a sense of them enjoying developing the skill, even if they're not a high flyer in biology.
exactly. And I think just having the autonomy to be able to have assignments where you get to drive and figure out what you want to look for is a really important piece as
Mm.
well.
Mm. Right. So there's that connection with stuff that is real world, if you like, that, and I guess they can choose paper to find papers along things that they might have an interest in.
Yes, yes. And I think a lot of students will pick papers in the past, just sort of anecdotally. I've had students that say, oh, my mom is suffering from this disease. I want to learn more about it. So a
Right.
lot of students will pick papers based on topics that are relevant to them personally.
Hmm.
Some students will pick topics, those that are in undergraduate research. We're pulling in papers from their advisor and being like, hey, I've never read this one in depth, but it relates. Let's look more at that.
Okay.
So there's really it's entire as long as it's a primary journal article,
Mm.
what they find is entirely up to them.
Okay. And those who came in with some kind of research experience, was there any difference between their responses and the rest of the students in the class?
So one finding is statistically significant, the other one isn't. We find that those who are coming in at the beginning of semester identifying as doing or having done research tend to slightly undervalue themselves in terms of their confidence, especially with things like reading figures.
Okay.
I think just again, my suspicion is if you know how tricky that world can be, maybe you're a little more intimidated by it.
Mm.
Then that isn't significant, but you see a little trend there.
Mm.
But what is significant is when we look at the questions specifically involved in interpreting figures, those with research experience do it's like a point and a half better. It's a very
Okay.
small difference, but it is significant. Um, so I would say everyone's doing well, but
Mm.
there is a slight boost, which makes sense because
Mm.
if you're in research, that is the world you're playing in.
Yeah.
But I also think it's really heartening that it's not like a spectrum where
Yeah.
they're in a
Yeah.
whole different field and we're able
Mm.
to encourage everyone and through these tools build everyone's skill sets,
Okay.
which was something I was really looking at.
Okay. Was there anything that didn't work or anything that you think, oh, I would do that differently?
Yeah, so I think my biggest mistake was the hardest thing to fit into this semester was the librarian's talk. I wanted to give
Mm.
a solid half an hour, really teach the searching skills. I don't know anywhere else we bring in someone and be like,
Mm,
all right, here you go. So it was really important to break out that time. And so I put
mm,
it on the first day of class, and we had briefly talked about assignments. We really hadn't unpacked the spirit of the assignment. And
okay.
so next time I would make sure that students know this is target practice, right? We're not judging you on a bullseye. We're showing you how to shoot an arrow, and we want you to practice that technique. And there's no right
Right.
or wrong journal articles to pick.
Hmm.
I was a little worried that I'd scared off all of my students on the first day of class because we were talking about if-then functions and all the
Okay.
all the details, and they were really useful tools. I just think that on the first day without context, that was a little more intimidating than I had intended it to be. So I think
Right.
just making sure that the tools are cushioned in a low stakes environment from the very beginning
Mm,
be really important going forward.
mm. And is that recorded in some way so that can they go back to that information?
Yes, the
Um,
librarian provided us with a worksheet with
okay.
links. And then there's a bigger PDF that they have available as well. So
Okay.
they are very welcome to, keep asking questions, get more support if they need it.
Okay.
But then also they have resources
Mm,
to tap into.
mm. I guess also like a slightly unexpected spin-off could be that they then know who the science librarian
Yes.
is, right? Which can be lower an entry barrier to
Mhm.
asking the librarian questions and things later on.
Yeah, and just things, I mean, I learned a lot, like when you're in PubMed, you can install an app, like an app that will mean Virginia Tech will automatically pull like you don't have to go back and forth. You can just find the papers. Virginia Tech will help you pull them straight out of PubMed
Okay.
without having to go through the hoops. And so I think things like that that will make life easier at the 4,000 level,
Mm,
that if they start playing around with them now, just become sort of second nature.
mm. Okay, great. Um, do you have any advice for someone wanting to implement a similar sort of thing in their own class?
Yeah, so I would say when I started, there were not nearly as many resources for people trying to do this work. And so my advice is look around and take advantage of all the resources you have every step of the way. Um,
Hmm.
I got support in terms of how do I write surveys? Like what's a good survey for confidence?
Mm,
What is too many questions to ask?
mm,
What would be useful to include? I built the assignments and had the librarian, and she worked through the drafts with me on the literature search, trying to
mhm,
come up with what things would really help them think about this and process what they're doing and what choices
mhm,
they're making. So I got support building all of that. I've been putting journal articles in the class in an active format for several years, so that was not
mhm.
an overnight one semester.
Right.
We've tried it, and so I'm adding a few more every year, but that was pretty steady. It wasn't as new this semester.
Mhm,
And then just making sure the grading wasn't a burden. I would say, as you're just starting new things, there's you have to know where your boundaries are to be able to be
mm,
sustainable.
mm,
So, for example, I think scientific writing is also a very important skill, but with 120 students, I don't have the capacity to really teach those skills and
mm,
practice those with the students effectively.
mm.
So this is something that I can fit in my class, um,
Right.
and that's not going to burn me out. So I think that's really
Mm,
important as well. Um,
mhm,
and setting the assignments, like you can drop 3 of the 5 literature search assignments. So if you know what you're doing, you're good. We don't have to practice anymore. If you need
right.
more support, you have 5 tries with feedback. So that supports students in all areas. It doesn't make the assignment arduous for them, and it
Mhm.
decreases our grading by more than half. Um,
Okay.
and so I think things like that built intentionally in help make these things more more adaptable and easier for everyone involved.
And it also makes those each individual assignment relatively low stakes, right?
Exactly.
Which
Yeah.
is a hugely important part of it, I imagine.
Yeah. I would also say I was surprised by how easy this was. But on my end, I just gave a quick survey and did a few things in class.
Hmm.
And I was surprised what I was already doing was already a research story. And
Right.
so I think Cause helping me out with, again, how do you build the story? How do I
Mm,
get the IRB approval? How do I go through those processes? SAG, which is the statistics group on campus that will give you free support to help with the statistical analysis. They did so much to help me look
Oh,
at the data I have and build beautiful graphs and really understand the story coming out of the data I had. And again, I don't think it was that much data, but we have some beautiful figures and some really beautiful things that came out, even if that small data set that was completely de-identified.
mhm,
And so I really think if I had said I'm going to write a paper on this 7 years ago, it would have been almost impossible. And now
right.
it's just been every step of the way, there's someone there to support you. And so I would say take advantage of those things. You don't maybe need to write a paper, but it's really cool to be able to take what you've done and not only do it, but like and analyze it, see if it's working and show it off.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
so
Great, Meg, thank you. So I know we we have a paper in process,
yes.
and you're also going to be presenting at a conference, I think.
Yes, I'm going
Um,
to submitting this work to the CHEP conference at Virginia Tech in the spring. And for me, that's really important because I think this is broadly applicable. So it doesn't have to be bio, it could be chem, it could be,
yeah.
many, many fields have primary literature. And I think it's really important to be able to support students in sort of critical thinking and being able to find sources and thinking about what are you reading? Where did it come from? Do I
Mm,
like these methods, right?
mm,
Is there something I would do differently? So I think just building those skills in my context, they're coming from STEM, but I think they're important in a lot of areas. And so I think I'm hoping that this site brings up a discussion that people can see it's not that hard. It's,
mm,
just a little extra bits putting in, and now your students really get to feel that what they do matters.
mm. Great. Excellent. I think, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you feel you want to say?
I think I was surprised, then this is anecdotally, it's not in the paper, but I was really surprised there were methods that we went over that were paper specific. Um,
Hmm.
and so for me, that's something that we saw it in class, this flow cytometry or something. And it was a technique that we used to understand, apoptosis. So it was right at this time. And then we got to the final exam and it just happened to have that same thing. So I was very careful to go back and say, hey, you know, let's review this again.
Mm,
And many of the students were like, well, of course I remember that technique. That was the technique that we used to study Alzheimer's. And so I
mhm.
think just having real examples helps the
Mm,
material stick better. And
okay,
it just makes it for the students, it's not just memorize this thing out of a textbook, but
right.
this is a real story with real potential for real people. Um, and I'm a human biologist, so I tend to use a lot of biomedical
Sure.
applications as well. I also find for me that kind of we have a bit of an Alzheimer's thread running through the class, and it's
Hmm.
not everything is Alzheimer's, but we can kind of cumulatively use those papers to kind of tell a story long term, and that was a really cool thing for the
Mm,
students as well. So I think they're paying attention in ways they may not normally if you're just
right.
rattling on as a straight up lecture. And that
Okay.
was for me really fulfilling to see that their retention rates and their like application of the material was, I think, at a higher level than it's been in past years.
Right. Right. I think that's a really important point, and that, when I know one of the things that is often recommended when you're teaching a STEM subject is to connect it to sort of a real world example.
Yeah.
But I think you're illustrating very clearly here the power of that, kind of in an unexpected way. So I think that alone is a very useful kind of takeaway. Um, Fantastic. Okay, well, Meg, thank you so much for
Absolutely.
giving
Thank
me
you
your
for having
time.
me.
And yeah, we'll we will continue on with this work, and hopefully this will inspire others to play around with similar things in their own classes.
Give it a try. I mean, I think it's fun to see. I've been teaching for what, 8 years now, and I think getting stagnant is hard on everyone,
Mm,
and so it's a really good chance to try something new, and
mm,
and once you start putting journal articles in, you are not at a loss for new material ever.
mm,
Um,
mm. Great. Excellent. Meg, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Great. Okay.